everyone. This is Talk Back. It is May 4th, and believe it or not, we're getting ready for a big political season that's starting off now with conventions in the state of Connecticut for our state legislature, governor race, our United States Senate, the under ticket, Attorney General, Secretary of State, Treasurer, Controller. And we are in Colchester and surrounding towns in the 48th District. We are going to be electing a new state representative, as Brian Smith, who is now the Democratic state representative from this district, is not running for this term. And so we have someone new to tell you all about, who is going to be running for the seat in the 48th District in Connecticut for the state legislature's House of Representatives. And let me introduce Chris Rivers. Hi, Chris.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. It's nice to see you. I hope your face, as we go through these next few months, will become very familiar to people in town with your brochures and your door knocking, I'm sure, and your campaigning. So we have to learn all about you. First of all, tell us what is made up. What are the towns in the 48th District, so everybody knows if you're going to be their representative?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me on. First and foremost, the 48th District is one of the districts that got redrawn. The towns now include all of Colchester, all of Franklin, all of Basra, and a good chunk of Lebanon. So those are the towns. And for anyone who is listening to this, who thought the 48th District was something different, it was up until this election season. So again, Colchester, Basra, Franklin, and about 2/3 of Lebanon.
Right, because the state will redraw the districts depending on voting patterns or whatever, and so sometimes we don't understand why we're connected to Westbrook and the state Senate district, but that's the way it is. So, Chris, you live in Colchester, right? You moved here several years ago, right?
That's right, and I actually live in the southeast corner of Colchester. My backyard is Lebanon, and behind that is Basra. I am right at that corner of 3 of the 4 towns that I'm hoping to represent here pretty soon.
Okay. Now, you've already become active in town affairs. You were on the Board of Education in the town of Colchester, and you were born and brought up in Connecticut, which we'll get to. But tell me, now that you've come back to home in Connecticut and to become active, why did you choose Colchester? Give us a pitch. What makes Colchester the place that you and your family chose?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it boils down to one thing above anything else, and that's the people and the sense of community. When I was growing up in Connecticut, across the street, we had cows. I knew the people who were my neighbors. And then when I went off to serve in the military and in the government, and then when we were looking to move back home, we really wanted to find a community that still felt like a community. And here in Colchester, we've been very fortunate and very blessed to find a community that is invested in education, and find a community where we know our neighbors and get together even during the pandemic to have outdoor barbecues and volleyball games and just feel like it's a place we can really put down roots. And so for anyone outside of Colchester looking to say, hey, maybe is Colchester a place where can feel like an old school community? It absolutely is, and that's what I love about it.
Okay, great. So tell us how your life went when you were growing up in Connecticut. What part of the state did you grow up in, and what schools did you go to, and so on?
Yeah, so I was born in Waterbury, raised in Naugatuck over on the western part of the state. Grew up, went to Western Elementary School, then to Hillside Middle School, then to Naugatuck High School. So really spent my entire childhood growing up in Naugatuck. And at that point, Naugatuck was one of those communities that was basically a residential community. A bunch of people worked elsewhere. And it was a very awesome middle class upbringing. And from there, though, it was always a question of where can we go to from here? A lot of people end up staying in Naugatuck, which is awesome. A lot of people move all throughout the state. I wanted to go see what else was out there, and particularly being on the western side of the state, being so close to what happened on September 11th when I was in high school, that's what ultimately led me to enlist in the Connecticut National Guard and go off and see what the world had. And in doing that, I think the thing that we realize is how special Connecticut is overall. And it's one of the reasons why we always wanted to come back. But basically, it's your middle class farming sort of community on the outskirts, industrial downtown, with a downtown that's been going through a bunch of revitalization, just like a bunch of our towns across the state. And so that's how it's summarized growing up in Naugatuck. It's pretty much what you expect.
And so what is it? Because I know you'll talk about how you got involved in the military and you went to West Point. I want you to get to that story. But what was it? What were the years that you were in high school that made you interested in going into the military?
Yeah, so I graduated from high school in 2004. And so September 11th happened early in high school. And basically, once September 11th happened, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I grew up. I just knew that I wanted to help people along the way. And in high school, that meant working at Boy Scout camp up at June Norcross Webster Scout Reservation and teach Boy Scouts ecology and rifle and shotgun merit badges and like be part of that community. And then during high school, it also meant working as an EMT in Naugatuck. And then when I was looking at what do I do from here with the security situation at the time, I think people forget how afraid a lot of people were. And I just decided I wanted to help people. And one of the ways I could do that was by raising my hand and saying, I'll go so you don't have to. And so I enlisted in the National Guard and thought that was how I was going to be able to pay for college. Knowing my family had gone to a 4-year university up to that point. So it was a bit of exploratory learning as we went, and ended up deploying to Operation Iraqi Freedom directly out of high school. And then while I was there, had some really good Army officers who suggested I should retake my SAT in Kuwait and apply for West Point, which is how I ultimately ended up going to West Point with a little detour through Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Well, what was your role in the Iraq War? What did you see action? Were you part of a unit that was fighting? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the units I was with was what we would call in the Army combat support. So I started out as a human resource specialist, and then because of my EMT training, helped out as an EMT as we went, and made it up into Iraq several times. And part of that experience really allowed me to see firsthand what the overall issues were that was facing our soldiers. And in hindsight, it's part of the reason why I now do nonprofit work that is focused out of these areas that are very underserved. But at the end of the day, my age 18, 19 or so in Operation Iraqi Freedom 05 to 06 was kind of my eye-opening experience of seeing firsthand what the situation in Iraq was and starting to wonder, how are we actually going to do something about this? Which is why I wanted to get my education.
Interesting. So tell us, West Point has a reputation of, well, it is the cream of military colleges. And we think that it's very difficult to become a student there. And we respect so much the graduates of that school who go on to lead us in the military. So tell me, how did you get in, and what was it like being a student at West Point with the whole burden of all of that wonderful history of that school, right?
Absolutely. So in order to get in, took my SATs in Kuwait. You apply to it just like any other school. And the school as an institution wanted me to go to the West Point Preparatory School, which is a separate program that is 1 year long, designed to help combat veterans or people that might need a little more help get ready to be able to answer the academic rigors that you'll face at West Point. And so I was very fortunate. I got to spend a quick year in New Jersey at Fort Monmouth, and then went to West Point with all of the advantages of understanding what the institution is all about, understanding what it means to be a cadet there. And so when I got to West Point, I was very much ready for the struggle. And I think the thing that makes West Point special is this: no matter how good you are, and it's a school full of valedictorian, Eagle Scouts, everyone who has been successful up to that point in their life is almost guaranteed to fail at some point. And it's done so by design, so you can understand how to deal with failure. In boxing class, you will get punched in the face and you need to keep moving. And the other thing that is amazing about West Point as an institution is the history department has a saying that a lot of the history they teach was made by people they had taught. And so it's impossible to walk around the grounds of West Point and not wonder, when Eisenhower was here, what was he thinking? When Grant was here as a student, what was he thinking? And going through American history at an institution that has been helping shape American history since 1802 is a really unique experience, and it's a once in a lifetime experience, on top of being a student studying physics and nuclear engineering, on top of being on a sports team that every cadet has to be on. It's the sense of awe and the sense of responsibility that just gets inculcated into your soul of always needing to give back to the country that has given you the opportunity to attend an institution like that.
Wow. That's a great explanation of your stay at West Point. So you studied in the sciences. Tell us why you chose that field and how that impacted your future plans after you graduated. Did you go, was it a 4-year school before you graduated?
That's right. It's a 4-year undergraduate program, and I did it in 4 years. Most people do because of the rigor that they have there. And I ended up majoring in physics with a minor in nuclear engineering. And the way I ended up doing that was I originally picked chemical engineering as my major. It's a very liberal arts sort of college, so you don't get to specialize as much as you might in other schools. And I originally thought chemical engineering was going to be my path forward, because once I finished with my Army service, I thought I would maybe end up brewing beer for Samuel Adams and having a very laid back life. Ended up switching to physics because I quickly learned that a lot of chemical engineering is based on refining oil. That didn't excite me. And what I really liked about physics was the fundamental understanding that you can just use math to dissect problems and understand problems and break them down to their component parts. And that sent me on a career track out of West Point to go into the engineer corps to help build bridges, help solve problems, no matter what they are. And those fundamental skills of using math to break down big overarching problems is something that I think translates really well, whether you end up continuing to do engineering, physics, nuclear engineering, or if you pivot like I have done and start looking more at public policy and how our society runs, how our country, state, local institutions run. It's the fundamental understanding, being able to use math to really break things down and understand it, is something that has stayed with me ever since West Point.
Yeah. So tell us what you did, what your career trajectory was after you graduated from West Point.
Yeah. So after graduating West Point, I commissioned as a second lieutenant as an Army engineer. Was very blessed and fortunate to be stationed at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. That's also where my wife, who is also a West Point grad, graduated a year ahead of me, and I started dating, got married, and went and deployed to Afghanistan. Spent an entire year in Afghanistan doing what we call route clearance, or driving around and finding all of the explosive devices that are buried in roads that the insurgents, the Taliban, were putting in there. And while I was in Afghanistan, we had a 30-day mission. On the third day of that mission, one of my trucks struck an IED. Those 3 soldiers got medevac to Germany, and I spent the next 27 nights sitting on hillsides in Afghanistan wondering, why are we still here? And at that point, that was 2011 time frame or so about the halfway point of the war. And what I realized was, having studied kind of hardcore science in my undergrad, I didn't feel very comfortable that I understood how our government makes decisions, how countries interact together. And that's when I decided that regardless of what my career had for me, I wanted to go study just how government works, and then maybe how it can work better. And after Afghanistan, came back to the United States, became an executive officer for an organization of 250 soldiers, and ultimately got out of the Army after spending a year doing data science for the Army and the Pentagon, helping the Department of the Army understand their budget processes, their requirements, and supporting organizations that are all over the world and trying to use data to understand what their operations are doing. And that left me in a really good place to leave the Army with some really amazing skills and go dive into those questions I had when I was sitting on a hillside in Afghanistan.
You know, the Afghanistan experience was a really tragic one for America, and the getting out was a tragic experience last year. Were you I'm sure you weren't the only American soldier involved in Afghanistan who questioned our involvement and what was going on. Is that true? I know that when you're actually in the service and working, you really are not supposed to speak out against what your orders are. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so I think at the core, the military in our country is still an apolitical organization. We all have our personal views, and I think those views vary more than people might think on the outside looking in. And it should be apolitical, but it's also an organization that I think really prides itself on trying to get the big picture right. And I think in hindsight, looking at the Afghanistan war, the one thing that a lot of my peers I've talked to like really struggle to understand is this: how do we get the big idea so wrong? I think most of us understand why we went there in the first place. I think most of us are very proud with the work that we were able to do while we were there. And yet all of the good successes that we've had along the way, all of the difficulties that we put on soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guard as well, to do almost an impossible task. I think the fundamental question for the country is, why do we ultimately have an impossible task in the first place? And I think that goes back to making sure we get the big idea right up front. And I think those ideas are things that are hotly debated in military circles, and rightfully so. And I think it's one of the things that our political apparatus at any level could do a better job of keeping the long-term incentives and the long-term big ideas in view, because I think in a lot of modern day American politics, it's very short-term, short-sighted in nature. And I think that's one of the big issues that we have. And I think that was one of the big issues with Afghanistan.
Yeah, and also just to finish up this subject, we have a good heart in America, so
Yeah.
we may have a long-term objective, but often it's to transform cultures that are not capable of overnight becoming the kind of democracies that we would like, and that it's not easy to do. And look what's happening around the world today. Countries veering away from democracy toward authoritarianism. And we, send a lot of guys and women out to fight for that democracy. And it's hard to you can't transform them. And so we get disappointed. And that's the legacy of so much of what we try to do, right? Yeah.
I would just adding one more point there. I also think it's important to note that the timeline of success can be much longer than anyone suspects. So the countries that we have done particularly well in, think back to World War II and the fact that we are still in countries like Germany. We still have a presence in South Korea. We still have a presence in Japan. And those are three countries that have gone from the shambles of war or previous authoritarian regimes to being amazing players in our current international system. But yet we still have a very active presence, both diplomatically, militarily, across the board, to keep those relationships strong. And that's a sort of timeline that we probably should have been debating when our political decision makers were making the decisions to go into places like Iraq, into places like Afghanistan.
Yeah. Good points. So, okay, so now where do you go from there after your tour in Afghanistan? What's your next career move?
So, tour in Afghanistan ultimately led me to working at the Pentagon for the Department of the Army, doing data science sort of work to help use data to inform what we're actually doing and the decisions that we need to make, whether it's funding decisions or whether it is operational decisions and how we can do better. But that was also the overall transition period for me of leaving the active duty military and going to become a student at Georgetown University to go study public policy and international relations.
Wow. Was that a master's program or how did a 1-year master's program?
So it was a 3-year dual master's program.
Oh,
So
wow.
one master's in public policy, one in what Georgetown calls foreign service, what a lot of the rest of the world would call international relations.
Okay. Wow. So, and then what did you do after did you work while you were in those programs? What did you do at that time?
I did. So I ended up going to work for the U.S. Department of State, where I managed our science and technology relationships with all the countries throughout North and South America in partnership with our embassies that we have in all those countries and our amazing diplomats that we have serving in all those countries. I was the civil servant working at the State Department headquarters to just manage it all and be the coordinating piece with all of our U.S. science agencies, of which there are many, and they are truly amazing scientists that we have working for the government and all throughout that could use a lot more opportunities to collaborate across international lines in ways that really benefit the American people that kind of happen in the background most of the time.
Wow. So when you finished your 3-year double master's program, what did you do? We're getting close. We're getting closer to the present.
We are absolutely.
Wow.
So after the 3 years double master's program, after working at the U.S. Department of State, I ended up leaving government service when I finished up my graduate programs and decided that I wanted to try to do something that could help the government along the way, but also something that took me out of government service. My wife was still active duty at the time, and so I went and joined a large consulting firm, and I've been doing government consulting ever since 2018 to really help particularly our federal government and different parts of the federal government solve some of the biggest problems they have.
Okay, so that's what your current employment is, and
right.
You feel over all the years of your education, you have really learned how government works, and you have a handle on not just the workings of the government and the scientific community and the government, but international relations as well. Is that right? Because of your experience in Iraq and in Afghanistan. So you've got a very, very diverse and varied, very rich background. So why does someone with all of that rich background want to go to Hartford and the rough and tumble of being a state legislature, which is in a way a part-time position, right? Why do you want to do that? What's in it for you and for the people of your district?
Yeah, such a great question. I think at the core of it, for me, state level politics has very little to do with politics, and it has everything to do with how can we help people? How can our government institutions work better? How can I take all this background I have from all over the world of serving America at large and use it for my neighbors, use it for my family members who are all still here? And I think there's an awful lot we can do in this state for what we are currently paying in state taxes. And I think we can do it better. And I think someone who has been an engineer, who has been a diplomat, who has served in the military, can bring a lot of these different pieces together to offer the state legislator perhaps not a perfectly unique perspective, but a solid perspective that is based on not just Connecticut experience, but experiences around the world of what has worked, what hasn't worked. And I think I am very excited about being able to do that in a very pragmatic way. So at the core of it, it's all about helping people. And I think I'm at a stage in my life where, one, I can afford to do it because it's a job that takes up a lot of time. And I'm very blessed to have employment that can help sustain a standard of living for myself and my family. But two, I think it's a really great point in time where there's a lot of opportunity to be had. And I think that we can really set a tone for Connecticut moving forward with savvy investments, with bringing more technology into government to make it more efficient, that will have real life impacts for the people that live in Colchester, Boswell, Franklin, Lebanon, and frankly across the state, which isn't just me, it's my entire family that still lives here too.
Now, you've also been serving in the Board of Education. Tell us what that's about and why you chose to take that route also.
Yeah, so when a spot on the Board of Education for Colchester opened up, I raised my hand for a few reasons. One, my life has personally been fundamentally changed by the role that educators have played all throughout my life. It's the educators that believe in you, that push you a little bit harder, that really stand by you. And I really believe people who are in education, whether they're teachers, whether they're administrators, whether they're staff, the custodians, when you tour the schools here in Colchester, you can just feel how much they want to help the kids attain the best that they possibly can, given their merit, given their talent. And when the spot on the Board of Ed opened up, I just said, you know what, that's something I really want to be a part of. I want to be a part of helping children be in a position to navigate this crazy world that we all live in and to do the absolute best job that we can preparing them for this world, and to do so in a way that isn't just politically motivated, to do so in a way where you can talk with people of different political parties. And I am personally really proud of the Colchester Board of Education for how we reach across the aisle, how we talk things through, how we find ways to disagree and still be friends at the end of the meeting. And at the end of the day, it's about making a better future. And that's why I raised my hand to serve on the Board of Education. And that's why I'll enjoy continuing to serve on the Board of Education.
Okay. So now you need to start campaigning and meeting the people. And I'm sure you have a plan for doing that. But before we get to that, tell us, what are the issues in Connecticut? Let's talk about our state. It's not a state that's growing. A lot of population is leaving. We have lots of issues, always budgetary issues of connecting our industries with the education of the students coming up. What are the issues that animate you, that you feel are really important and that you want to work on when you go to the legislature?
Yeah, so I would start with, there is no shortage of issues to work on. There is a bunch of stuff that we as a state need to be doing, and that is the blessing and the curse of being a state as diverse as we have from an economic perspective. And so for me personally, I think the issues that are important to me and to the district are things like, how can we improve the education system? How can we tie it into industry? How can kids who are growing up in our education system here be as prepared as humanly possible with what we can afford, with the skills that are actually going to serve them all throughout their adult lives? And how can we relook education in a way for the time that we're living in and not be so reliant on the system that was designed in some cases in the 50s? And I think we need to look at it from beginning to end and see what we can do better for education across the board, because I think education is the key for a lot of people to be able to have social mobility, for a lot of people to be able to find the careers that they want for a very long period of time. And then beyond that, education is first and foremost in my mind. But quickly behind that, we have an awful lot of farmers here in the district, and agriculture is such a huge piece of what has made Connecticut so amazing for so long. I mean, we helped send cows to Valley Forge to help feed the army during the Revolution. And we've been having farmers here before we were a country, and we'll continue to have farmers here long after I'll be done serving in the legislature, whatever that is. And I think that we can do better for agriculture at large. I think we can do more to help feed our communities based on food that is grown here in our communities. And I think we can all be healthier while doing it. I know that there's an awful lot of farmers out there that have probably been hearing a lot of these political talks. There's things in the current state budget that's getting passed that really helps farmers from a financial standpoint, but it all falls flat if the government services and the government programs are too cumbersome, too hard for them to navigate. And that leads me into my third point of, I think we can do better. I think we can have government that is easier for people to interact with. I know there's efforts to digitize things. I know the governor has a whole bunch of programs to make government more approachable. I think we need to do more to really innovate how government works, to make it work better overall. And with the legislator, you're not just dealing with money, you're dealing with oversight. You're dealing with the rules that we all need to live by. And I think having more people in legislature that can dive into technology issues, that can dive into overall functioning of government is important. And then finally, I'm a veteran. My wife's a veteran. We have a bunch of really amazing people who have served in the military, and our state should be a leader in what we do for veterans. And then we should take those lessons learned and apply them to other parts of our state as well. So those would be the main issues I'm really looking forward to diving into.
Okay. Now, of course, you're running as a Democrat,
Yep.
and you've got a series of issues that are, we can call them, they're bipartisan. They make sense. They're what we think of when we want to have good government in our state. But we live in today's world of extremely partisan politics, and you probably are aware of that. And when you run, you're going to be part of that Democratic team, from the governor, lieutenant governor, all the way down to your races, right? How do you feel you're going to be able to navigate that? And just as an ancillary question, why are you a Democrat? Why are you running as a Democrat?
Yeah, so I'm running as a Democrat, and I've always been a Democrat for my entire adult life for a couple reasons. One, I believe in the power of education. I believe that government has a role. I believe that government is the only institution that represents all of us, and we should expect more out of it, not less. And I think there's more to fiscal responsibility than just cutting budgets and cutting taxes. I think there's a way to do investments that is smart, that will pay off over a long period of time and not just have immediate paybacks to taxpayers. And I think we should do some of that, especially with the surpluses that we have been able to achieve now. But we also need to make sure we're investing in education, we're investing in public safety, we're investing in agriculture in ways that make sense for the long haul. And for those reasons, that is why I come at this from a Democratic perspective. But overall, I'm extremely moderate. I've already been able to reach out to several of our Democrat colleagues in the legislature. And the thing that I really am excited about from a Democratic Party perspective is our party has always been a party that has been a fairly wide coalition. Most of the time, there's a bunch of different issues that we don't agree on. There's a bunch of issues that we do agree on. And within the Democratic Party, that debate is very much welcomed. And I very much intend to having debates with my Democratic colleagues and reaching out to Republican colleagues once we get to Hartford. But in the meantime, it's also important that that isn't just something that happens only in Hartford on the legislative side. It also needs to happen while we're campaigning. And so I plan, as the campaign is getting ramped up, to be reaching out to folks regardless of your personal party affiliation. I want to have the conversations. I want to hear different viewpoints. And I think that we should represent what we're going to be in Hartford as candidates starting now in the campaign trail, which I know is not always what you hear from candidates who are running for office.
Right. So what about the are you going to try to stay above the fray of the partisan back and forth? That is really very toxic. Certainly on the national level, we see it, and we may see it sadly in the local campaign in the governor's race. You need to, I think you said very nicely, try to stay out of that fray and try to appeal to everyone. Because there's so many issues that aren't Democrat or Republican. They're just necessary issues to deal with in your district. So, Chris, what would be the 3 or 4 or 5 top issues when you out campaigning? If you're at my door and I say, okay, Chris, why do you want to go to Hartford? And what are your 3 top things that you want to try to accomplish or address once you're there?
Yeah, so I think the 3 top things for people to remember are, first and foremost, education, taking care of teachers, making sure kids have what they need for the long haul, and making sure that support from the state to local communities like ours remains what it was originally promised when they first passed all the mandates. Secondly, I think we really need to focus on making government better, not making government less. And then third, I think working on agriculture issues and making sure that our farmers have the sort of responsive government and the ease to use government that they deserve to have, not just as farmers, but also things that we can translate for small business owners across the board.
Okay, let's take a look at just a couple of photos. Here you are. Is this your campaign poster?
That is. Yep.
And is that your wife?
That is my wife and our dog Ray. We're Star Wars fans.
Wow. And tell us again, you met your wife, you were both cadets together?
We were both cadets together. She graduated a year before I did from West Point and got stationed in Hawaii. And we had exactly 1 date at West Point, and she thought I needed to improve. So we didn't get a second date until I worked my butt off and was able to get stationed in Hawaii as well. But that's where we started dating, but we did meet at West Point.
Wow. And where is she from?
She's originally from Southern California.
Wow. So that's quite something. You chose the Colchester area instead of Southern California.
So it wasn't just me. We definitely made this decision as a family.
Right.
She, having gone to school not all that far away in New York at West Point, really likes the Northeast and really likes the culture here compared to what it was in Southern California. The weather could be a little better for sure, but she is very much happy here and happy to be part of the community. Like I was saying, she gets really into volleyball and sports. So,
all right. And are you going to do a lot of door to door? When are you going to get started? Well, first of all, tell us, you have to get the nomination first at a convention that's coming up this month. Talk about that.
That's right. So our convention, I believe, is May 11th, and I'm the only Democrat in the race. So it's kind of a formality in some ways, but we will get together and we will make sure the process is followed. Representatives from the Democratic, the Democrats in the 4 different towns will get together and vote whether or not I should be the Democratic nominee for the seat. And because it's a new seat, we've been talking to all the Democratic town committees and people at large in order to gain that support and have those conversations of what issues are important to them and to make sure that their issues are represented as well. So, but May 11th, have the convention, we'll have a vote, we'll eat some finger foods and get together at the Colchester Elementary School, and then we'll be off to the races.
Right. So you're running as a uncontested candidate for the position. So you're lucky because sometimes it's contested and sometimes it might be a primary. But once you get the nomination, you can start your campaign, right?
That's right. And there's really nothing stopping me right now. So we will be door knocking before that convention. We've really spent the last few weeks talking to folks from the Democratic Party of the different towns and talking to farmers and talking to different veterans around town and just talking to different folks to hear what their issues are. So the campaign's kind of already started, but once we have the convention, we'll certainly ratchet it up a few notches.
Okay. And so I think this is a great poster. I hope you're going to use this around. We'll see this around the different towns, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So great. So let's conclude by, again, let me give you an opportunity to tell me something you would most like to say to people who might get a chance to vote for you. What would you most like to say to them?
I would say this: if you're looking for someone who is extremely pragmatic, who's going to look at every issue on their own merits, who is going to hear from every side before making a decision, but ultimately someone who will own a decision and will treat the incentives of everyone in the district equally as important, regardless of what party you're from, regardless of what views you have. I think I'm that candidate with my experience as an engineer, as a diplomat, as a government consultant. I think I have the skills to be able to maneuver within the Hartford ecosystem and really get some seriously good work done and build on a lot of the past successes that we've had in this state.
Great. So I appreciate your coming on. People will be able to watch this on channel 14 and 1070 in the Comcast area. If you have Comcast TV, they'll be able to see it on Facebook and they'll be able to see it on YouTube also. So if nobody caught it now, it's available to see whenever. So thank you so much, Chris. Good luck in the campaign. And we will see everybody next time on Talkback. Thank you. Bye. Bye, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.